Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum. My name is Citizen Strife, and this week, we're going to do what we did a couple of months ago. We're going to do a post-game report and review of our experiences, mine and Leigh, of Final Fantasy. So we did Final Fantasy VIII. We knew we were going to do Final Fantasy VII, so we just bulldozed the hell out of it, because we're recording this in January. I'm not going to post this review until March, but I don't fucking care. We're going to do it anyway. But yes, Leigh is here. Say hi.
That was so damn cheerful.
I try to be.
Oh my god.
But yes, Leigh's here, and we're going to do the same thing we did last time. I don't know if it's going to be 2 hours long, but it's going to be long because this game is kind of a big deal. Is a big deal.
Yeah, I'm on coffee. Don't judge me.
I don't care. I'm running on caffeine too. Sometimes we need caffeine. So.
Dude, my daughter said the funniest thing earlier.
What's that?
Okay, we were having this conversation the way you do. She was talking about how she and her friends were talking about Ozzy Osbourne the other day, and I was like,
"Go on."
And I'm like, "Did you tell your friends about the time when he did a duet with Post Malone, and everybody on the internet was all like, 'Oh my God, Ozzy should be so thankful that Post Malone made him famous.'" And she's like, "No, I forgot to mention that," and I was like, people on the internet can be so dumb. Like, how many drugs do you have to be on to be that brain dead?
Well, you also have to remember that Ozzy's been through some weird ass shit, because he was popular in the 70s, popular in the 80s, popular in the 90s, took a little dip and did stuff away, did the Osbournes to get him famous again, and then for like 20 years was doing Sabbath and then not Sabbath and not releasing stuff, and then obviously
so you
people
cut me off before I could tell you the funny part.
Sorry.
So when I said, "How many drugs do you have to be on to be this brain dead?" she looked me dead in the face and said 46.
46 drugs? Does it have to be certain amounts of drugs or a certain type of drug?
No, but I just looked at her and I'm like, I totally love that you actually had an answer for that.
I'm confused.
She's my funny one.
But yes, the internet is dumb. But that's been borne out for 25 years. Nothing I say is going to change that. And yet we're on the internet doing an interview/review. Oh my God, what are we doing?
We sold out. We have no souls.
I don't know. Until I start making money off this, I don't know if we're selling out.
We can't really. You can't say we sold out because we're not getting any shit for this.
No, I've been getting advertisements for HelloFresh on Stream Elements. I don't know why.
Me too.
So I don't think we're actually. I mean, that seems like a fake ad for all I know. But
I know somebody who's used it, but I can't afford it.
No,
I can't sit there. I can't afford to do HelloFresh myself.
Yeah. So yeah, HelloFresh, if you want to send us some stuff for free without us having to advertise on stream, that's totally fine. I could use an extra $1,200. Anyway, but yes, Final Fantasy VII is a big deal as far as JRPG is concerned. It's probably the most popular one, whether or not you consider Elden Ring a JRPG at this point. I don't fucking know. But as far as Final Fantasy goes, I looked up the data. They said it sold about twice as much as Final Fantasy VIII and pretty much any other in the franchise. So I was confused because it's like everybody knows it, everybody talks about it, everybody won't shut the fuck up about it, and I'm like, how big of a deal was this back then? And like, oh, because Final Fantasy sells 5 million copies, 7 million copies. Now try 18 million copies. I'm like, oh. Good on you, Final Fantasy VII. Good job. That's why everybody knows what you are. So biggest... go ahead.
Final Fantasy VII was the game that ushered Final Fantasy into the PlayStation age.
Yes, and for those not in the know, it was originally a Nintendo franchise for 6 games, but they were trying to do a tech demo with Final Fantasy VI characters, and they realized that the N64 couldn't handle all the graphics. So they were like, hey, could you go on CDs? And Nintendo didn't do CDs until like the GameCube, and even then they did those like the super mini disc things. So Final Fantasy and Square were like, nah, we'll go on Sony. Yeah. And the rest is history. I've made that perfectly clear. My mom shows up in 1997. She's like, hey, I'm just flat out going to get you a PlayStation for Christmas. What game do you want? Kingsfield 2, which I had no knowledge of, or Final Fantasy VII. And I'm like, okay, I played 4, I played 6, let's go with it. And then the rest was history. And now I can't shut up about JRPGs. Good on me. So
good on her.
Yeah, good on her as well, because the PlayStation was good. I'm not going to say it was my favorite console, but I've played PlayStation ever since. So what do I fucking know?
PlayStation was one of my favorite consoles, actually.
Yeah. I'm going to have to do a rundown of PlayStation 1 games that aren't Metal Gear and Final Fantasy, but it's a hard list because I wasn't like into the Crash Bandicoot and Spyro thing. I mean, my brother was into like Legacy of Kain and stuff like that, but I've played stuff like Ridge Racer and things like that, but it's like, it was Final Fantasy 7 and 8 and 9.
At some point, I'm going to get you to play Resident Evil.
I mean, I have played it. I just didn't like, get into survival horror. Like Silent Hill 2 is like kind of an aberration in that sense. But again, it's not bad. Like I played 2 and I beat it. I just don't have any. I don't remember anything other than Leon and Claire being in the fucking city on fire and then going into the police station. I have no knowledge of anything else. So that's where my headspace is at.
Have you not watched any of the times that I played it on my streams?
I mean, maybe a little.
At one point, I was trying to learn how to speedrun it, but I gave up.
How do you speedrun on tank controls?
It's not hard.
I'm doing
basically for me, speedrunning was trying to complete the game in less than 2 hours.
I mean, that seems doable.
It's doable. I just haven't managed to get closer than 2 hours and 6 minutes.
Well, let's see here. Anyway, my whole thing with Final Fantasy VII is I like it, but I don't think I like it in the way that it's this game changer, amazing experience. Like, most of it is for its time, yes. But a lot like Ocarina of Time is kind of like, it is a product of its time, and it should be left in that time, and there are better games out there. And there are better Final Fantasy games out there. I have like 2 or 3 that I find better than Final Fantasy VII. But every time I go back and play it, I'm always reminded of how good it is. And it always is like in that top 5 Final Fantasy spot. And playing this again did not change that opinion. In fact, I think I liked 8 more, but not enough to like change my opinion on it. 7 was what it was. I always liked it. What was your interpretation of how we played it?
Of how we played it?
Yeah, how you played it, and did it change anything about how you experienced Final Fantasy VII, or did any of your opinions change?
No. My opinions have been the same for years.
Good. That means we know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, well, I've told you this, and I've even mentioned it during the playthrough that we did together. Final Fantasy VII was my first Final Fantasy. It was my introduction to JRPGs, and it's one of the best memories that I have of the PlayStation era. Just spending the time that I got to spend with that game before my friend took it back. I absolutely loved playing. I loved every single minute of the game. I loved playing it. That first time playing it through when I didn't know anything about the game, And, like, I was barely able to get to the internet once a week to be able to look up information about things. Yeah, that was a thing. The internet was not readily accessible to me when I played this game. I was lucky if I went to the library once a week to use the internet at the library. Um, but I had to discover everything in the game for myself. And if there was something that I was having trouble doing, I had to wait until the next time I could go to the library to see if there was any information available on what to do. And it ended up leading to me buying the strategy guide for the game just so I would have information and not have to keep waiting a week to go to the library for it.
I love those physical strategy guides. I don't know about you.
Oh god, I loved it. The only strategy guide I had that I hated was the one for number 9.
Yeah, because play online, buy our stuff, subscribe to our stuff, and nothing's changed. In fact, I think Square Enix got worse.
Got way worse. But anyhow,
yeah.
But for me, Final Fantasy VII was like, at the time, it was one of the best games I had ever played. And that's saying something because I played A Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, which is still the only Zelda game I really like playing.
Yeah. And because that's kind of the sphere that we're talking about. Because when it comes to the popularity, a lot of it had to do with the marketing. A lot of it had to do with kind of a lightning in a bottle situation. I remember I think I told you on an episode once, there was like, I was sitting in a panel. It was just like a fan panel of Final Fantasy. And of course I was cosplaying as Rude at the time, sitting next to a guy who was Reno. But, and so of course I was obviously a Final Fantasy VII fan, but I was like, I liked 6 more and 10 more. And honestly, I think 9 took 3rd place at the time. But the question for the panel, for the audience, was like, raise your hand at like what your favorite Final Fantasy game is or what you started with. And I started with like 4 and 6, and then as soon as 7, it was just it was like 60% of the room, and I'm like, okay. I'm like just staring into space, like, that's a lot of hands, because it's even now, it's like nobody's talking about remaking Final Fantasy VI except nerds like me. They talked about remaking Final Fantasy VII for 20 years, and they finally decided to do it because it's their golden goose. And I don't want to go too far into the whole compilation of Final Fantasy VII, like Advent Children and whatnot, until like later. But I mean, now that we're living in a post-remake world, it really does kind of feel kind of surreal just how big of a deal this is. And like, it isn't getting replaced. And I think we've said this. This isn't a game that you can replace, regardless of how much time passes, how much it kind of looks weird, at times. Lego people,
And how many bullshit remake decisions they make about it.
Hell yeah. And like, if you don't like the remake, that's fine. I mean, I don't like everything about the remake either, but it's still Final Fantasy VII, and it still feels like it.
We'll get into that when it's time to talk about the remake.
Yes. And we won't spend forever on it, but because it's not even done yet. That's the thing.
No, and from what I've been hearing things, and I'm just like, if this is the direction they're going, please, I'd like to get off the train now.
So they went full Nomura. Just fucking perfect. Anyway.
No. Like I said, I'm not.
Well, I don't want to know anything either, but judging from the reaction that you're giving me, that's a scary thought. But
I'll bring it up when we talk about the remake, but we're not talking about it yet.
Yeah. Really, when I go back and playing these games, it's always about re-experiencing the story for me. I mean, I like the gameplay. I like the whatever, because Final Fantasy is that staple, for that time is like, hey, press X to beat shit up, fight them in a line, whatever. I always kind of go back and I want to re-experience the world and the story. And really, a lot of the story kind of hinges on like 5 people at most. And it says a lot about the game that those 4 or 5 people are so really well fleshed out. and we'll start with Cloud. And it's not even like a romance thing. It's just Cloud as a character is such a unique thing to combat because he's not like an amnesiac like Terra. He's not a well-to-do adventurer like so many other guys from the early Final Fantasies. He was fucked up. Cloud had problems. And it's really striking to see his journey, you know, given how popular of a character he is, how messed up he was, and what he went through. And it's a lot of the game hinges on that.
I actually just found this out like last night or the night before. I was watching a video about another character and it mentioned something about Cloud in it. Cloud was made fucked up on purpose.
Ouch.
Part of his personality, a lot of when they were designing Cloud, they knew from the start that they wanted a lot of his personality to be based on the fact that he was emulating someone else. They just didn't have a clear idea in their head of who he was emulating.
Oh.
Until they created Zack, and then it fell into place.
Yeah, and it always feels kind of strange, like going back after 20 years and looking like, because I am trying to keep this in perspective of just Final Fantasy VII as presented, but because Crisis Core exists, because the other stuff exists, like Cloud in Advent Children is not the Cloud in Final Fantasy VII, because he's a lot more like he's troubled and like not angsty most of the time, but
Cloud in Final Fantasy VII is more like
he's a dork, kinda.
He's struggling. He's struggling to deal with. First off, he's struggling to reconcile his weird identity crisis that he had in Final Fantasy VII with all of the shit that he did while under Sephiroth's influence. Sephiroth and Genova's influence, plus the fact that if it hadn't been for that Sephiroth killing Aerith, he would have done it because he was being manipulated. He was struggling not to do it, but he almost did it.
Yeah, that would have made that scene even stronger. Like, God, man, imagine like
he had really conflicted feelings about Aerith, but deep down he really loved her.
Yeah, and it did strike me a little bit with Aerith's death is just how much of like Sephiroth was going to win either way. Because when we talk about Aerith's situation, like I don't think anybody knew. I sure as hell didn't. And it ends up becoming that thing where it's like the spoiler that everybody knows but nobody talks about. And can we say it's a spoiler? I'm like, we know what happens. But there are people who still don't. And there were situations like that in, say, Final Fantasy IV, Final Fantasy V, and even back as Final Fantasy II. You know, characters die. That's what happens. The fact that they put so much effort putting Aerith and Cloud together as a sort of item, irrespective of what Tifa does later, Aerith just gone. Like, there's no, like, hey, there's a way to bring her back. Hey, just use a Phoenix. No, she's fucking gone. Like, even in Final Fantasy V, they give, like, Galuf's stuff to another character, so it's almost like he never leaves. Like, Aerith's just done. And regardless of what anybody says about that moment, like, that is some intense shit. I almost always cry when that scene happens.
I'm tongue-tied. No, it's one of those just... Oh god, I had something in my head and I completely lost it.
Well, maybe the question would be, like, if Aerith had survived, would she have still had feelings for Cloud as Cloud? Or would if she, because the whole thing is she sees Zack in him. She sees it like right away. And I think
she
even
really
Tifa,
does.
I think even Tifa does in a way. But
Um,
Aerith totally keys in on it.
Yeah, Aerith is like Aerith. Aerith meets him, and just even the way they met was really similar from what I've read.
Yeah, it's like these people got to
I think
stop falling off of reactors and breaking my stuff.
I think that was when they went back and they I have never played the Crisis Core games.
Yeah.
And I've never, like before Crisis and Crisis Core, I've never played any of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, but I think they said something about how they met because he fell into her chapel.
Yeah, they recreated that moment for Zack.
So it's basically like, if you didn't, if you knew all of this before you played Final Fantasy VII, it's like no wonder she strongly identified him with Zack, because they just met the same way that she and Zack met.
Yeah, and there was always that weird subtext. Like Final Fantasy VII isn't like Final Fantasy VIII is about love and romance. Final Fantasy VII is like interpersonal relationship, and like I know something about this person that you don't know, but I can't tell you. And there's like 50 million different like. You've seen that meme of the guy standing in front of the detective board, and he's got these cross lines everywhere, and he's like, this connects to this, and this connects to this, and this is like 50 million different people connect to each other in weird ways, and they always like zigzag. That's exactly what Aerith's life tends to be.
Yeah, because she's like, okay, you know how we have that game 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon?
Yes.
Well, now we've got 6 Degrees of Aerith.
Yes. Because everything goes.
Everything intersects with her somehow.
Yes. This was the thing I don't. This is one of the things I do think Remake gets better. Because there's two things I think Remake does better than 7. I'll just say it. Expressing Aerith's kind of powers as an ancient, and then Cloud's like inner struggle because of the advent of voice acting and like the passage of time. Like I always felt like Cloud having issues like jumbled in his head. It's hard to do in text, and all he's really doing is like he's just kind of a mirror image. It's effective, but like you can never kind of tell that Aerith has powers. But then she gets stuff in like Remake where she talks to ghosts, she talks to her flowers, she senses stuff in the air. It's like those are things that you don't really get in Final Fantasy VII, other than maybe like 1 or 2 scenes, and I'm like, what is so special about her? It's kind of like hidden, like her ancient powers and what it means and why Shinra wants her so much. But they still make her more than just, hey, I'm the special lady. Because far be it from me, I remember Wall Market more than anything else in this game, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, because of what Aerith does to Cloud for that entire segment. Because she's fucking with him the entire time.
Wall Market is memorable, and at the time, things like that were like really taboo.
Yes.
So perhaps having that in a video game at that time was really memorable, because that was like right around the time I think that RuPaul was really taking off and becoming popular. And RuPaul at the time was like the only person doing drag who was like getting positive press about it. Because he wasn't going out and getting in all kinds of bad scandals and shit.
Yeah. But I'm just sitting there in Wall Market, and part of the reason I like Aerith is because she's just sitting there with Cloud the whole time. It's like, why don't she dress like a girl? It's like she comes up to it, and you can see her in the video. She's just like kind of laughing to herself when Cloud's just kind of muttering.
Oh, not just to herself, she's sitting there full on body quaking, laughing.
Yes.
Why do you think I did that scene with a giggle fit?
And then Cloud forevermore is known as the dude who cross-dressed. He's Claudia. But again, and I think what helps is that Cloud, even in his messed up mental state, still kind of took it at face value. It's like he doesn't want to do it, but he knows like he's being led around like a fucking idiot, but he's going along with it because Tifa is his friend. And I'm like, you gotta fucking do it. Like, you gotta go into the sleazy honeybee, and you gotta deal with the dudes. It's just, Wall Market is just fucking amazing, but it says a lot about what Aerith is able to do, because Cloud kind of lets the girls kind of walk over him.
Softy.
Yes, but at the same time, like, his relationship with Tifa isn't nearly as like Aerith is like 1 year older, but she just has this power over him. Tifa and Cloud don't. And that's what I was always struck by when I was dealing with Wall Market, and we'll talk about Tifa now, is the different ways that Cloud and Tifa and Aerith all kind of interacted with each other, because this is before like love triangles and harems and whatever. Like, I was aware of shit like anime, so I was always like, I like Aerith more, but Tifa's great too, so I can't fucking decide. Neither can Cloud. So it's like, well, the game did it for me.
Honestly, I think that if Zack hadn't died, I think that he and Aerith would have gotten back together, and then there wouldn't have been a love triangle.
Yeah.
Because Aerith clearly missed him.
Yeah.
She only latched onto Cloud so hard because he reminded her of Zack so much, and she missed him.
Yeah. And she even said as much, because we went through the date in Gold Saucer. We had Aerith, and she said, I want to meet you.
Mm-hmm.
And Cloud didn't know what she meant. She was like, no, I want to meet you. And that's the weird thing, is you go into the Tifa situation, it's like Tifa's the only one who knows what the real Cloud is like. And she's the one that finds him. So getting to Tifa, it's like Tifa has this weird subtext where she's not like when you see characters like Tifa who punch things really hard and kick things really hard, you think they're super badass chicks and do all this great. Hell no, she is like very like unsure of herself and just doesn't know what the hell is going on. She's mostly kind of like following along with Barrett, just kind of by proxy, by association. She doesn't really want to go along with Avalanche and stuff. She's just kind of there most of the time. It's only until go ahead.
Knows that. See, from Tifa's point of view, she knows that things with Shinra are bad, and that Shinra is a bad company and they need to be stopped. But she's not on board with terrorism. She's very, very iffy about that part of it. She knows that they need to be stopped, but she's thinking that there might be some other way they can do it without resorting to hurting people. That's the part that she's really hesitant about, is she doesn't want to hurt anybody.
Yeah. And it ends up becoming a thing where, like, when we hear about Cloud's scenes with Sephiroth and the fire, Tifa knows everything. And she's kind of weirded out by the fact that Cloud does know things, but doesn't know things. Because she knows who Zack is, too, but not to the extent that Aerith does. That's the weird thing. It's like, the intersecting worlds. It's like Tifa knows everything, doesn't want to say anything, but in essence, her actions of not saying anything caused Cloud to go fucked up even worse in Disc 2. So I wonder if she also felt that she was responsible for his actions too. And that's just like, there's so much going on with those three characters.
And it's mostly just because, like, she was really under the impression that Cloud was not in Nibelheim. Because she never saw him. He never took his mask off.
Yeah.
He was so ashamed of not having done what he said he was going to do that he ended up basically just hiding from her while he was back in town that time.
Yeah.
So she had no idea he was even there.
Yeah.
From her point of view, he was supposed to be there, but he never came, so she was really disappointed about it. But she met Zack and Sephiroth, and there was even a picture taken of them.
Yeah.
But then, she sees him all this time later, and he knows everything about the fire that he shouldn't know. But there are things that he should not, like, there are things that he shouldn't know that he does know.
Yeah.
And then things that he doesn't know that he should know. It's weird.
Yeah. And it does kind of bleed back into the power that Sephiroth and Jenova have. Really, Sephiroth as a character, there isn't much. To me, it's the myth that he creates, because the game is effective at as like telling you and giving you this vibe that this Sephiroth guy was this amazing soldier, which he was. Like, they basically purposely in the game just make him unkillable, right? And we see that. We see it through his actions. So it's not like he's a mastermind villain, which I personally hate, as I've said before. He does a lot of stuff himself. Jenova does a lot of this on his behalf or through her own machinations. That's what it was always kind of screwballed with me, was like, what is Jenova doing versus what is Sephiroth doing? But at the end of the day, it all kind of leads back to Sephiroth has this power over people as this mythic figure, and that's unheard of. Like, even Kefka, as much as people like him, he's kind of a goofball. He does everything, but he's kind of a dork. He's Joker. He does all his crazy shit, but there's no myth about Kefka until late. There's a myth about Sephiroth from the get-go, and we don't even see him for like 5 hours. That's the crazy thing. But what is your take on Sephiroth and Jenova as villains?
Personally, I think the only real villain is Jenova. Jenova is the calamity from the sky that crashed into the earth and caused the injury that's even that started all of this. It was the catalyst. And then the ancients did what they could to seal Jenova up and keep Jenova from being able to hurt the planet any more than it already had. And then of course freaking Shinra scientists found it.
Yep.
And they mistakenly labeled Jenova as an ancient.
Which was a terrible idea.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, let's just keep this weird living being away.
I think the only reason they mistakenly labeled her as an ancient was because of how old she was.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's really the only reason that they did it.
Yeah.
But then, during the course of their research, Professor Gast finds out that she's not an ancient, but the records don't really update that. The records don't really get updated with that information because Professor Gast, ends up meeting an untimely end.
Thanks, Hojo. You fuck.
Hojo struck me as just like one of the worst, most pathetic people of all time.
Yes, it's such a weird thing, and we'll get into Shinra more. Hojo is that main secondary villain, and a lot of it is just he's just there to have a bad time and sow seeds of wreck. But like, he knows what Jenova is, unlike Gast, which is the scary part. But I still don't know he fully understands it either.
He doesn't. That's Hojo's problem, is that he wants to be this well-respected, scientist like Dr. Gast. The only thing is, he's not smart.
No.
He is nowhere near the League of Brilliance that Dr. Gast was. His research methods are very sloppy. He's got an unchecked ego that just goes out of control.
Yeah.
his scientific curiosity is basically like what the fucking Nazis did during World War II.
Oof.
All kinds of like really hinky experiments, and it's just awful. I'm not even gonna say anything more than
Well, and I think the game bends over backwards to make Hojo more important than he should be. And again, this bleeds into the Genova thing. It's like, how much is Genova's influence really affecting the Sephiroth thing? All of it. But all of Hojo's stuff is affecting Sephiroth too, because in the beginning, like when we see the Sephiroth of old, like he's super powerful, but he doesn't think anything of it. He's just kind of doing his job, you know.
Mhm.
And then
It's that he sees Genova in the reactor, and he's been told his whole life that Genova is his mother's name.
ew.
So, that starts making him think like, well, wait a minute, if this is Genova, isn't my mother Genova?
Yeah.
What, then this is my mother?
Yeah. So that's where he goes off the deep end. So
And then he starts looking into his own past and finds out that he's a product of the Genova experiment.
thank you again, Hojo, you fuck.
Genova Project. Yeah, like, no wonder he went off the fucking deep end. Half of it was the fact that he ended up finding out that he was the product of biological experiments, which should never have been done.
Ugh.
And the second half was the fact that he had so much of Genova's cells in his biological makeup that she was able to exert control over him.
Yeah. And
That's why I say that he's not really the villain.
yeah. So
Because he's not fully in control of what he's thinking or doing.
no. And it's weird because all of the effect is Sephiroth, like all of the ephemera now is Sephiroth as the guy who did the fire, the everything. Like, yes, to an extent, but like Genova killing Aerith, that was her doing, because every time you fight Sephiroth, you're actually fighting Genova. The only time you're facing Sephiroth is that final scripted battle, it seems like, or even the finale. It's like, what part of it is Genova and what part of it is Sephiroth? It's always been kind of that, like, give and take, you know? And like you said, I think Genova is the real main villain character, but all of the subtext is Sephiroth after that. It's like everything is Sephiroth. No, Genova gets nothing, like no character. So she's like hidden in the background, and that's always been the kind of strange thing about it.
Well, yeah, because Genova was never meant to exist as an actual character.
Oh.
She was always just supposed to be the thing. Like, somehow she's not dead, but she's not autonomous anymore either.
Okay, so more like a force of nature rather than an actual villainous creature.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, she's kind of like a tornado that can think.
Ew, that's a scary thought.
Yeah. Like, she knows how she revels in her destructive ability, and she can plot where she wants that destruction to go.
Hmm.
And she'll do anything she can to make that destruction happen, including controlling other people.
Yeah.
Because, of course, Shinra can't leave anything alone.
No.
They freaking inject Genova cells into a lot of people. Like, that's how they create soldiers.
Yeah.
I mean, they sit there and tell them that they're being infused with Mako energy. What's really happening is they're injecting Genova cells into them.
Yay, I'm a superpower being. Why do I feel so wrong?
Which opens it up later for anybody who's got Genova cells in them. It's opened up for them to possibly become a puppet.
Yeah, as we've seen in the, those weird guys. I can't even do the voice anymore because I'm putting too much effort.
Don't. That's just way too freaking creepy.
Yeah, but yeah, it's those weird guys in black capes. If they're, because that's the weird thing, is like Cloud is like on that level of spectrum, but at the same time survived it.
Uh-huh.
Other people are not.
There was just something about him. that just, he's got like incredible fighting spirit.
Yeah, and I think to an extent Zack too, but not like they didn't focus on it as much. But that's how they were able to avoid that vegetative like reunion weirdness. But to me, getting back to Hojo, that was one of the things I never understood. And this goes back to Final Fantasy IX's weird plot dump. I think they were trying way too hard to put the sciencey weird bullshit into the story. And I think you told me my criticism was, why not just call it PTSD about the Sephiroth incident? You told me PTSD didn't exist, or if it didn't, it wasn't something that they would talk. So they came up with a different method of explaining Cloud and Sephiroth and Hojo and all that stuff. It ended up being really sciencey.
It's the truth. Back then, people only recognized PTSD as something that happened with war veterans.
Oh, yeah.
Like people that had been in wars. So it wasn't something that was widely diagnosed outside of war veterans.
Okay.
And it wasn't something that was ever really talked about, because back then mental health was still kind of a taboo subject.
Yeah, and
if you admitted you needed therapy, people looked at you and thought you were just crazy because you had to be in therapy.
Yeah, and Japan, for sure, even more so than America, does.
Oh yeah, and Japan, they were like, they still do in some cases. It's just like your mental health, while it's important, it's something that should be kept completely private and not discussed.
Yeah.
So having something like that, mental issues, they're not going to immediately jump on the PTSD bus back then to illustrate it.
Yeah. Because that was my main criticism, knowing that they probably weren't thinking that at the time. They came up with that weird sciencey method. Like, I get it, but I also wonder if Hojo is really necessary as a villain, because if you'd worked around that whole sciencey bullshit, you didn't need Professor Gast. You didn't need Hojo. You had Cloud and Sephiroth and Tifa and Zack, and, Aerith was coming later. You can see my criticism of Hojo as a character is effective, but also unnecessary.
Yeah.
I just think in the sense of streamlining that story, because it's an effective story because Cloud is such a unique character, but going back at it, there's all of these cutscenes, the Nibelheim past, the Genova reunion, Hojo going apeshit and talking about, oh, he's this and whatever, and then they kind of bend over backwards, and that's, you might know this better than I do having played Parasite Eve, but that's something that they were doing in the late 90s, was doing a lot of sciencey stuff. Like, Final Fantasy's always been weird, but I don't know. I wasn't as fond of that as I wanted to be. That would be my main criticism, is I don't think it was a streamlined story. I don't hate it, but
wasn't.
I also don't.
The story, the story had so many different things about it. Like, it kept evolving and changing. Mm-hmm. That was eventually, like, Zack was never even originally intended to be a character.
Oh.
And he ended up evolving. He ended up being created to fill a need for something that they had going. Like, they needed to fill it. They had a specific need that they needed to fill, and that's how Zack ended up even existing in the first place. The video that I mentioned earlier that I watched was literally a video about Zack and his origins.
Yeah, because it's weird, like, trying to interact and intersect 7 as its own entity without going into Crisis Core and Advent and whatever, because you can't really do that. Like, that's the weird thing, and I guess we can talk about it now before getting back to Shinra, is Final Fantasy VII Remake and basically redoing Midgar, redoing how Zack exists, redoing how all of the stuff exists. Because I think, like, even Crisis Core Reunion, like, it's supposed to be a 1-to-1 remake of Crisis Core, but it's still going to have an impact on things in the remake, which is, like, that's so crazy.
part of why they ended up making these games about Sephiroth and Zack was because of the unexpected popularity that they found out Zack had.
Yeah.
He had such a small part in Final Fantasy VII, but he turned out to be like this runaway popular character.
Yeah, Vincent and Yuffie had the same thing. It's weird.
Well, Vincent and Yuffie were always intended to be part of that game. It's just due to something or other, like they almost didn't make it in.
Yeah.
Zack was one of these characters that was like, he had to be created to fill a specific need. Like, part of what led them to create Zack was the fact that when they were coming up with the original characters for the game, Sephiroth and Aerith were supposed to be brother and sister. That's why their hairstyles are so similar.
No.
But then
No.
it changed.
No. I'm glad they changed it.
Then, once they started working on the story, they realized it didn't work for them to be brother and sister, so they were lovers instead.
Even worse.
Dude.
What, Sephiroth and Aerith falling for each other? That's
so
interesting.
Then it turned into this thing where it ended up not work, because the story kept evolving and changing and rewrites kept happening. It didn't work for them to be lovers either. So they still liked the idea of Aerith having a lover in her past. So they made Zack.
Okay. No.
And then when they made Zack, that finally helped fill in the blank that they had about Cloud too, because like I had said, they had set up Cloud's personality to where he was imitating somebody and emulating somebody, but they didn't know who that somebody was just yet. And then they made Zack to create this need that they had, for a past lover for Aerith. And then it became, kind of this thing, like Zack has some of Cloud's original character design. Cloud's originally designed to be a dark-haired guy. And then they ended up doing that for Zack instead of making Cloud a blonde guy.
Yeah, he gets the chocobo hair.
But then they decided, since they're making this guy to be Aerith's past lover, he can be the guy that Cloud is emulating, because this dude's super cool and he's heroic and noble.
Yeah.
He's everything Cloud wants to be. I mean, other than Sephiroth.
Yeah.
And then they made him best friends with Sephiroth and Sephiroth's other squad. To kind of illustrate that, this dude has everything going for him. He's everything Cloud wants to be, including friends with Sephiroth. He's got everything that Cloud wants. So Cloud naturally starts emulating him and looking up to him, and Zack notices, and he's like, "Hey, you're a cool dude too. Why don't we be friends?"
Yeah, Zack always struck me as the kind of guy that would be friends with anybody if he had the chance.
Super friendly guy. He was super heroic. There were like no bad qualities to him. That's why he appealed to everybody, because at his core, he was a genuinely good person who just ended up having a really crappy thing happen to him. And, I feel bad for his parents going 10 years without any word about his whereabouts or his well-being or welfare or anything. They don't even know he's dead.
Yeah, it's also kind of weird. Like, you don't even have to go into that. Like, this is part of the relationship dynamic of, if you bring Aerith and Tifa there, they start opening up more and more about who Zack is before we even know this guy exists.
Yeah, like, Aerith will say that Zack was her boyfriend that she had told Cloud about. And Tifa, she'll just kind of keep it a secret, but be like, "Yeah, I knew Zack."
Jealous.
She won't say how she knew him, but she'll admit she knew him.
So yeah, sorry about the blurting stuff out. I just thought the idea of Sephiroth and Aerith being lovers, and then all of the freaking memes and stuff about them being brother and sisters, like 25 years of subtext. If that was what was going to happen, God, you have no idea what those memes would have been like now. I'm
Do you
kind of glad
remember
they
that
changed it.
channel I told you about?
Yeah,
Yeah, look that one up.
yeah. um, but
I think the video is called the Rise of Zack Fair or something like that.
speaking of Shinra, we've talked about Hojo, and this might not take a whole bunch of time, but Shinra as an entity isn't all that special. But for some reason, I have this fondness for every member that exists inside of Shinra because they're so different. Because some of them are evil, some of them are not, some of them are just you know. But it's like Rufus and Heidegger and Scarlet, like they're all different. Like Reeve is all different. It's neat that they have this like hierarchy and structure. They didn't have to do that. It's kind of neat that they actually have other characters that have living lives in Final Fantasy VII, despite the fact that like the Turks, they're just trying to do their job, but they end up being like these awesome like side characters that really shouldn't have meant anything. But you know, Shinra's great as a foil.
Oh yeah.
So
Shinra is
no, go ahead.
Shinra is one of those things like it. They're like the red herring of villains. They're in the back. They're in the back, and um, they're there. They're causing their own problems and everything, and it's just like, what the hell are they really doing? It just turns into one of those things that's like, just what the hell are they really doing? What's
Yeah.
their purpose?
Just
They're basically as kind of like a commentary on capitalism and corporate greed, I think.
which is funny
More
when
than
you think
anything
of Square
else,
Enix now.
right?
Yeah, but I mean, I do find it amazing that like most of them aren't evil. Like at most you could say Hoja's an asshole. Scarlet is just a domineering witch, and Heidegger
Goes
is
evil.
yeah, Heidegger is definitely just that just bumbling villain guy.
Edgar is an egotistical shithead who likes to kick around his subordinates when he doesn't get his way,
Yeah, and
or when
even
he gets humiliated in front of them.
yeah, so I always feel weird like Rufus has good qualities compared to his, President Shinra father, but it's like you understand he's just trying to do his job most of the time, but he's still kind of Machiavellian, but you don't get enough of
And
Rufus to like know that.
Okay, the dad has got his own shit going on. Shinra Senior, he's got his own weird psychoses going on. He's just got this god complex. I'm the king of the world because I'm the head of this corporation.
Yep.
Rufus is like, my father's full of shit. I'm gonna do things my way, but I don't think I should be coddling people. I'm just gonna rule with an iron fist.
Yeah.
He's like when the dictator finally gets to take over the government.
It's like you thought my dad was bad. Check me out.
Right? That's exactly what Rufus is.
Yeah, because I've got a shotgun and a dog.
Then he also likes to humiliate his subordinates.
Yes.
So then you've got Heidegger, who lashes out at his subordinates when he gets humiliated in front of them.
Yep.
Which is very bad narcissistic behavior, by the way.
Yep.
Then you've got Scarlet, who
Scarlet gets so much more in the remake. I love it.
Scarlet is your evil genius dominatrix.
Everything I ever wanted in a villain, right there. I'm kidding. Not really.
I hope you're kidding.
Yeah, but
I hope you're kidding. Like, seriously.
The fact she gets a slap fight with Tifa on the top of a cannon, it's like, what?
Scarlet is literally the type who will sit there and knock you out. She'll knock you out, handcuff you to a bed, and put you in some kind of weird lingerie, and then smack you around with a bullwhip before she finishes toying with you, and then ultimately leaves you to die somewhere.
This is not an M-rated game, by the way. I'm shocked it wasn't an M-rated game, but go on. And then we're forgetting Reeve, which is kind of weird because he's just kind of... Yeah.
Reeve is like the only decent person in the executive lineup of Shinra.
Yeah.
He's the only one in the whole group who truly cares about the people of Midgar. Yeah. Everything he does is motivated by wanting to make Midgar the best city it can be so that the people are safe and protected and are able to thrive. He's all about city planning and urban development and trying to give the people what they want.
Yeah.
He physically cares about them. He's the only one sitting there like, are you sure this is a good idea? Isn't there some other way to catch these people? Do we have to bring a whole plate down and kill millions of people just to make a point?
And then everybody else is like, fuck you.
Everybody else is like, you know what? You're just too soft. You need a vacation.
Yeah.
Why don't you go do this for a couple of days and just let the big boys handle it?
Yeah. Why don't you go control a toy cat or something?
Like, you know what? Why don't you go off and have a vacation and let the adults handle this one, sweetie?
Yeah.
Let the grown-ups take care of it. We'll take care of all of this for you. Just let the grown-ups handle it.
Yeah.
Oh,
go ahead.
He rebelled against them. Like, no wonder he sat there and infiltrated Cloud's group with a stuffed fucking toy cat.
Yeah, with an accent that I could never keep straight.
You know, like I said, they never wrote that he had an accent.
Yeah.
I think that whole accent thing was just something they decided to do for the voice, for the remake, because of his name.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, in Advent Children, I think he only had like 1 or 2 lines, so you could barely tell he had one, but I seriously think that was just like a creative decision they made on the spot.
Yeah, and I think he had more stuff in Dirge of Cerberus because Reeve was a character in that, but like...
I never played Dirge. I never played it or saw anybody play it.
Yeah, I've seen it. I don't suggest it. It's Devil May Cry, but worse. But I mean, it has good voice actors in it. I mean, the people who did Advent Children were in it, but it's like,
I actually played the original Devil May Cry. I hated every second of it.
Ouch.
I played it all the way through and beat it. I hated it.
What was the line? I was like, I was the one who was supposed to fill your soul with light or something. It's like, that's all I remember. I watched footage of it recently and I don't even remember.
Oh yeah. Let's get that into a Hallmark card right away.
Yeah. But yeah, high praise. Dirge of Cerberus, Devil May Cry. Right. I guess Devil May Cry is one of those things that it became a thing because it was the first to do it. I don't fucking know.
Devil May Cry became a thing because they were trying to make Resident Evil 4 and they fucked up.
That makes sense. But we're talking about Shinra, and we're talking about the remake in a way. We're talking about Midgar. And I have to admit, a lot of the fondness for Final Fantasy VII is Midgar. Oh, excuse me. A lot of the fondness is that Disc 1. Like, I have a fondness for Disc 1. I don't know if anybody else does. I think it's Midgar being as much of a staple as it is that is such a like unique setting. The bomb mission, the slums, like all of that stuff, and you forget that it's only like 5 hours of the game, but it has such a like crazy significance. It's so weird. It's amazing what it just does to set the tone. So let's just make the whole game about that now.
It's literally like, it literally sets the tone for how the rest of the game goes. Because you have, you're in the Shinra's home city.
Yeah.
This is where they've got their headquarters. This is their base of operations. This is where they are the strongest. And you're starting the game out in their turf, basically.
Yeah.
Trying to blow up their reactors. And you expect them not to retaliate?
Yeah, and they retaliate in style, as we've said. The plate go boom. Yeah. It's like, fuck. And it does strike me as strange. like the method of going from a 5-hour experience to 40 hours. Because you said multiple times that was your biggest problem with the remake, was turning it into a Midgar tour, and they didn't even. I don't think they did as much with Midgar as they could have done. That's the scary part. They spent so much of their time fleshing out the sewers, the ghosty graveyard, the fucking top of the plate. Like, they didn't show off all of the sectors of Midgar. There's so much stuff they could have explored but didn't, which is a scary thought. But you also have to remember, it's like there's so much more to find.
That they could have. Yeah, there's more they could have done with Midgar that they didn't do, and there's so much that they did with Midgar that they didn't need to do.
Yeah,
that was my big gripe.
Yeah, because Midgar is a staple, but I don't like. There are things they did, like they told us about Jesse. They showed us what happens on the top of a plate. It looks like a whole big fucking city, and it actually looks well to do. Like the bottom, like the ambiance and look of Midgar comes across way better in VII Remake than it did in the closed off claustrophobia of the original. But both games kind of don't, because VII Remake is trying to tell you the same story, but in a much more elongated method, which is unnecessary. VII's problem is they don't do enough of it because they've still got 80 to 90% of the game left to tell, so it's like one, half of a dozen, 6 in one, half a dozen in the other, kind of. It's like you can't win.
Yeah,
but to me, I think it's not just Midgar, it's the fact that for the entirety of disc 1, you're going off and learning about all of the other characters. We've spent so much time talking about the main 4 or 5. We didn't even talk about Barrett. We didn't even talk about Red, Sid. That gets explored in disc 1, thankfully. That's the cool thing about disc 1, though.
And in disc 2, there's like a little bit of a continuation for everybody except maybe Barrett.
Yeah, and even because then, Barrett is still like, hey, we're saving his town, but...
yeah, I mean, like, basically for Barrett, they did everything they needed to do in disc 1.
Yeah, and Barrett always did strike me as they wanted to make Mr. T, but they made more.
They wanted to make Mr. T with a gun arm.
Yes,
and they didn't make him nearly as cuddly as Mr. T.
No, but I still think the addition of Marlene as a character balances him out, because if he didn't have Marlene, I don't know if he'd be nearly as special as he is.
No. And you know what? The reason why he was so gruff and everything was.
Yeah.
I mean, not just his grudge against the Shinra, but like, I mean, yeah, the grudge against the Shinra. They killed his wife and child.
He has every reason to be pissed off.
Yeah. His wife, Elmira, I think? Or no, wait. No, his wife was Myrna. Elmira was Yeah.
Yeah.
Barrett's wife, Myrna, they had a baby.
Yeah.
And Myrna and the baby were dead.
Yeah.
And then Elmira was dead. That was Marlene's mother.
Ugh.
And then he finds Marlene, and it's just like, this is the one last living soul on the planet that he has emotional ties to. His best friend's child didn't die, and he's going to do everything he can to raise this little girl and make her happy.
Yeah, and those scenes in the Cour prison were pretty powerful, because it's like Barrett knows full well that Marlene isn't his daughter, but then
doesn't make him love her any less.
No, and it's weird because like we could have had Dine as an extra character, or at least he could have went to see Marlene. He chose I'm fucked up. I'm Cloud, but worse. I'm just going to sacrifice myself.
He decided that there was just no hope for him, and he decided to end it.
Yeah, and it's weird because the disc 1 thing, and I hope this comes across in the remake, but they don't shortchange everybody's extra stories. Like, that's really what builds these characters, even though they obviously don't get Cloud, Sephiroth, Aerith, Tifa. They get the bulk of the plot, but Barrett is still viable. Like, Red 13 and his devotion to his Cosmo Canyon and Bugenhagen and all that shit. Those are some really powerful scenes that you spend at most an hour. It's crazy to think that Yuffie gets a subplot to herself, like the Turks get a subplot to themselves in Yuffie's storyline. Don Corneo comes back for all weirdness that implies. It's crazy how much stuff they stuffed it, because that's disc 1. When you contrast that to Final Fantasy VIII, which is like all of the seed stuff, and then Timber, and then Deling City, it's like honestly not a whole lot of stuff. They packed the hell out of disc 1, and it's almost like, how did they do this? It's like a game in and of itself that they fit in that much stuff, and that's why I'm, even now, like, I still love Final Fantasy VII, because as soon as you're done with Midgar, you're going to June, and you're going this place, this place, this place. It's just like, there's never any break. You know, for those, like, what was it, 40 episodes of disc 1 that we did, it was like, there's always something to do. And even if you're not, like, big into this character, you're learning about a different character. So if we go from Barrett, we learn about Yuffie. And she's just there to steal shit. But they give her a subplot. It's really freaking cool. So it's like, even though she was meant to be in the game, it's like they still give her enough to go on as a side character. Vincent gets so much stuff to go on. You know, so everybody gets their own moment to shine.
Really go into Vincent's backstory until disc 3, though.
Yeah,
or the end of disc 2.
Yeah, and that stuff is intense. Like, all of these people have these intense backstories, and then Vincent's stuff feeds into Cloud and Sephiroth, and then it's just like, fuck. Because Vincent, to me, felt like a bit of a try-hard character. You know, they just wanted somebody super edgy, but then they actually give you their storyline, and it's like, oh.
You see why he's so edgy?
Yeah. It's just, no.
He was one of the Turks, and he got fucked over in a major way.
Yeah. It's like, I should have picked my dates better. No. But again, I think that's where, unlike Final Fantasy VIII, where it felt like there were less characters, but they were around, but not really. Like, you knew in Final Fantasy VII that everybody was still around, but I think even the side characters still got more than their fair share of stuff that you understood why they're on this journey. I never felt like Zell, Selphie to an extent, but Quistis and Irvine, I don't think really did much. And it just felt to me like they were there as friends.
I think that's it. They were there to be there.
Yeah. But 7, like, you can understand why most, if not everybody's still trying. Like, Yuffie, to an extent, like, you're just like, oh, she just wants to steal stuff. But it's like, it's still a motivation.
She
still hates
is still
Shinra.
She's doing everything she can because, 1, she does hate Shinra, and 2, she wants her hometown to go back to being the glory that it was before Shinra defeated them.
Yes. So that is a pretty strong motivation.
She's not just the materia thief that everybody writes her off as. She literally is doing everything she can think of in her power to do for her hometown's improvement.
I'm really curious how they're going to handle the world tour in the remake, because obviously stuff like Junon, Cosmo Canyon, Nebel, like, they're gonna have important things, but really they shouldn't take as long as Midgar at all. If they are smart, they do a lot with the backstory, but then they just get moving. Like, a chapter should be for every area, but I don't know if they're gonna do it. Like, there's so much in disc 1 that they didn't even get to in the first game, and I'm like, so that's my main concern, right? Because there's like 10 towns you got to go to, and it's like, but what about Costa del Sol? It's a minor plot point, but it's like the beach episode. It's like, you got shit to do there. You got stuff to do in Calm and Gungaga. It's like, what the fuck? There's so much to do. But getting off of the plot and the characters, we'll now get into the battle system. Speaking of stuff to do, materia. I don't know if I'm as a huge a fan of materia as I am to say, just give me a class and go. But you saw me fiddling with that system so much. It's almost too much.
Okay. See, materia, that was the only system. That was my first experience with Final Fantasy VII. I'm like, this stuff's cool.
Yeah.
I can sit here and just put whatever I want on somebody and then be a total badass.
Yeah. I'm reminded of
break right there.
Oh no, it's fine. I'm reminded of Barrett trying to get an explanation of materia, and we were just sitting there going, "Nope, we're not going to explain it." No.
Okay. Do you know why Cloud will sit there and say, "I'm not going to bother"? He's like, "I'm not going to bother explaining it to you because you just won't get it anyway." You know why? I went through the materia tutorial in my stream, and at the end of it, Barrett will still say something like, "Okay, he's like, I still don't get it. You're in charge of all the materia."
Way to waste 5 minutes of our lives, game.
He's like, "I still don't get it. I'll just have Jesse explain it to me again later."
Because really, a lot of what Final Fantasy VI did with the Esper system is enhanced to this degree. What they did was they turned the magic of we get magic from certain espers, we now turned into magic orbs have their own specialization. So almost every skill that existed in Final Fantasy 4, 5, 6, whatever, is now its own thing. Like if you want to be a knight, you turn into cover. If you wanted this, you could do a counter. Like there's so many weird mechanics. If you just want to cure people, you can level up cure. You want to do this, you gotta level it up. And like, and it's weird how like at the initial part of the game, you could do certain things, and then as soon as you just build, there comes a point where it's like you're given like 20 different summons, and you're like, which one do I fucking use? You've been giving me different summons every 5 minutes. I just had Leviathan. Now you're giving me Bahamut? What the hell, game? So it's like, I'm like, I have to pick and choose. But I also understand the allure if this is your first time playing a game. This is your choice. I think I understand why 6, 7, and 8 are so different from the other games is because you can pick and choose. There is an allure to that as a new person or even as somebody who is experimenting. Because in 9, you can't experiment at all. You're kind of stuck with Garnet's the healer and the summoner. That gone. You know,
and
even
I think
10.
that's more to, to attest to the fact that they made 9 purely as nostalgia for all the old school fans of the Nintendo series.
Yeah, because 1 through 5 are very... I mean, 5, you have the battle system, like the job system, but it's still pretty strict in what you can and can't do. In 7, you can put any materia on at any time to any character you want, and it does the same thing 8 does, where the characters themselves don't feel special. The materia does. But that's the balancing act, because you have all this experimentation and you're like, hey, I just want to use spells, or no, hey, I want to basically murder dudes with status effects. You saw me late in the game. I would just pile on status effect magic to a attack, and then everybody would die. It's like little cool things like that. Or as soon as you get Knights of the Round, you're like, okay, game over, I'm done. Like, who needs strategy? Because Knights of the Round exists. But then you chain this thing to this and this thing to this, and it's like they left nothing to chance. It's almost absurd how many options you're able to do. I don't even know if anybody's ever figured out how many different combinations of skills and stuff you can do. It's just mind-boggling.
It really is.
Because I did stuff I'd never even done before. Like, I've done... I didn't do it for this playthrough, but I know for the last couple of playthroughs I just want to do character classes. So if you're a summoner, you get all summons, nothing else. If you're a healer, you get all heals and stats and nothing else. That sort of restrictive thing. You can do that. So if you wanted to play it like a Final Fantasy 1 or a Final Fantasy 4 or say 9, you could do that. But at the same time, if you just want to dump contain materia, Ultima, and comment onto people, you can. And then as soon as you get the master materia, you're just like, nope, Cloud's got everything now. Bye. It was. I remember you asking me, hey, would you try not beating Sephiroth with, Knights of the Round for funsies? And it ended up being like a joke anyway.
Yeah.
So, but it's freeing. I think that's what I would say is the battle system is it's freeing. It's not very hard. This game is not hard at all, which is amazing to think about when you consider how hard the initial Final Fantasy games are. But there is something nice about being able to say, I want to use Yuffie. Let me use Yuffie. I want to use Yuffie stuff. Let me do that. So you can. Like, the only character that's mandatory for most of the game is Cloud, but everybody else is like, you want to use Barrett? Do it. You want to use Tifa? Do it. So it ends up becoming a game of who has the best limit breaks, right?
In a way, it's good to take time and build up each character anyway, because you want to build up their limit break.
Yeah. And the cool thing is you'll find that some of their like level 2s and level 3s are better than their level 4s. I remember Anger Max, which is the level 3 for Barrett, is better than his Catastrophe in terms of damage per hit. Because I don't think he hits as many times with Catastrophe. Cloud, obviously, Omnislash is by far the most damaging thing he's got, but Meteor Rain's still pretty good. Tifa's in that weird situation where she only does hits 7 or 8 times, but she gets to chain them. That's a cool idea. But then you keep missing with all the skills, and it's like, well, why did you have me miss? Damn it! You have Kachi, who's got the dice and then the slots. So if you really, really wanted to use Setzer again, why would you? But you can, you can tell I'm not a fan of Setzer or Kachi that much.
Okay, my only experience with Setzer really is Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah, and his slots are kind of crap, to be honest. His motives or his gameplay is fixed dice at the end of the game. As soon as you get fixed dice, you can do like 999 damage on a good roll. But other than that, he's just kind of, if you're good at slots, you're good. If you're not good with slots, you're bad. So it's like, Kachi's kind of the same way. That's why whenever I use him, I use dice, And I bet people in the comments are like, dude, it's so easy to do the slots. Just turn the thing and stop the thing and use the. I'm like, I don't want to think that hard. I don't want to manipulate the machine to not work half the time. Just let me punch a dude. Which is well in line with my strategy most times. I will punch a dude. But at the same time, I think the variability and versatility of 7 is still intact. That it's still accessible. Like, people who've never played Final Fantasy VII can go, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, but this sounds nifty. I'm going to try this. Oh, you're telling me I can use death materia? I want that. But then you realize, but this might work. Or you'll get the thing like gravity spells. Like, it'll work against like 1 or 2 specific characters. But then we'll find out that gravity heals the Tonberry, and we're like, fuck. That sort of like trial and error. Because that's the cool thing, is the trial and error of that system. Which you only really get in an initial playthrough, or if you're done like 4 or 5 times and you're like, I'm sick of doing Knights of the Round. I shouldn't be, but I'm kind of sick of playing with, because that was kind of the goal sometimes at the end of the playthrough, was we could just use Knights of the Round and kill everybody, But then we didn't really have to, because Ultimate Weapon did it for us. But another thing that Final Fantasy VII is kind of known for, but is also maligned for, is the side quests. Because for every good side quest, there's a terrible side quest, or one that makes absolutely no sense. So let's go through them. We'll start, obviously, with the Gold Saucer. I want to see that in a remake so hard. If nothing else,
everybody does.
Yes, I don't like, I don't even know what you could do with it, but I just shudder to think what the Chocobo races are going to look like. I shudder to think what Mog's house, like, I bet you Mog's house is going to look like Persona kind of does. That would be hilarious, you know, like a visual novel, you know, Mog's house. That'd be hilarious.
It would be so cute, though.
Yeah, because Moogles
you just
are
imagine
cute.
Mog's house playing out like a little Pokemon game.
Yeah, I mean,
That would be so adorable.
Yeah, because like Fort Condor is a thing that now exists in the. They added it in Integrate. I don't know how it's going to work with an actual Fort Condor, or if they're going to just keep it as the tabletop game that they did. Because that's in Yuffie's DLC. They turned Fort Condor into a tabletop game, so it's not like Fort Condor. So it's like they may or may not need Fort Condor to exist anymore. It's weird. But it's a thing. But Gold Saucer is like, hey, you want to do a shooting game? Go on a roller coaster, do a shooting game. You got a haunted house. Go to a haunted house and find a guy hanging from a rope that's telling you to go sleep for some reason. The Chocobo stuff. Oh, it's just crazy. And then, like, you've got all these, like, little weird arm wrestling games and punch games, and then you get the main three, but I had to separate them in detail because G-Bike, that is one of the best things about Midgar, is escaping Midgar. I'm not good at it, but I love doing it.
I don't like the G-Bike part that much.
You didn't like it?
Not a whole lot. I mean, it's... Part of it is just like... You keep trying to swing your damn sword and the bikes keep dodging you. And then...
Yeah. And I'll get to this in a different game. I think like Final Fantasy VII tries too hard to give you so many things to do, but some of them are not implemented so well. But I like it from a thematic standpoint. It's as soon as you try to redo it, you realize it's kind of stiff, kind of gooey. Because the bikes always have better handling than your sword does. So you end up basically beating the shit out of them with your bike rather than hitting them.
Right?
Yeah. But speaking of handling, might as well get this out of the way. Before recording, I have not uploaded this episode, but we're going to soon. I'll just say up front, Strife sucks at snowboarding. That's the title of a video soon. And, Leigh knows what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
I was never this bad. I've even done the Gold Saucer. I spent time, not in this playthrough, but years ago, doing snowboarding. I should still have been good at it. I don't know what it was, but in this game, I was just running into everything and running into every tree and running into a wall and jumping into everything. And it took like 5 minutes to beat that stupid level. And I didn't play it again. I don't know what happened. I just cannot snowboard for the life of me. Not that I've ever tried. Like I've gone on sleds, right? I would never snowboard, but why that doesn't translate to me playing a video game about snowboarding, I don't know. But again,
you got rusty.
Yeah, I got rusty and I just had to do it in public and I did very poorly. So much so that we ended up having a second dick joke that we weren't trying to have, but
oh yeah.
Yeah. So Leigh gets one in the beginning of Midgar, I get one during snowboarding, and it happened. But yes, for people who are decent at snowboarding, it's still kind of floaty. It's like a
That's
weird
because we're immature and dick jokes are funny.
Yes. But like snowboarding, much like G-Bike and even the submarine, is like really like floaty. The controls are like floaty. It's like gooey yet too loose at the same time because they're not designed to be. This isn't SSX. This is Final Fantasy VII. So they're like,
are you sure you're describing a mini game and not some kind of like really bad hotel encounter?
I don't know, but I mean, we don't know what happened in the Honeybee Inn because what happens in the Honeybee Inn stays at the Honeybee Inn. But
not with the way they gossip.
Yeah. But yeah, even the submarine. Like, you saw me in the submarine. I said when we do the submarine episode, like, I've beaten that in 5 seconds because I nailed the red sub in seconds. Other times I've failed. I've lost that guy and didn't know what the fuck I was doing. It took me like 5 minutes to kill him in this playthrough.
It did.
Because, again, it's like, I don't know the mechanic. Like, they're throwing so many weird little mechanics at you. And in most cases, you only get one try at it. The Chocobo Arena, or the Chocobo stuff in the Battle Arena, you get multiple chances at those. But the submarine, the snowboarding, you get one shot at it, unless you redo it. And it's like, well, you fucked up. You're taking a lot of damage. So, but speaking of Chocobos, we did it so that we didn't have to do Chocobos at all. But we still did it anyway. Because Chocobos are awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Because Chocobos were a thing since Final Fantasy II, but they've slowly kind of developed into... I think summons have taken, like, mythic and godlike proportions ever since, like, 10. But Chocobos are still kind of like this reverent, like, they're just nice horses. They're nice horses, and they're fun to be around, and like, unless they're trying to kill us, which they do in like mana games or something. It's like, they're awesome. Don't hurt them. So now we get to breed them. We get Chocobo World in Final Fantasy VIII. We get Chocobo Hot and Cold in 9. So it's like during that era, we were getting so much Chocobo stuff, and now we get like Chocobo racing games and all that stuff. Chocobo Mystery Dungeon. It's just like, it's cool. Except when you're trying to catch Chocobo. Yeah. That also happened. So we spent like half an episode, like 50 minutes trying to catch 2 Chocobos. And
oh yeah.
Let's just say it didn't work out so well. But yes, we were doing the method of no racing. So we had to use like soft resets or hard resets, and getting certain Chocobos. I was shocked, to be honest, how good that Chocobo was. Like, what was the stats? It was like 157 kilometers and then 999 stamina.
Mm.
I was like, why did I race so much? Because whenever I did the Chocobo race in other playthroughs, I thought you had to do the racing stuff. To find out you didn't have to race at all, and your Chocobo was still as good as any gold Chocobo you're ever going to get, I'm like, I felt stupid. But I'm glad we showed off both methods, because it's like, why not? Because the races...
But then you get the one for what was it, for the Desert Rose?
Yeah, that was terrible.
For killing Ruby Weapon. And then this dude gives you a gold Chocobo, and it's like this really crappy specimen of a Chocobo.
Yeah, I think it was like 20 kilometers per hour and like 120 stamina.
Only thing that thing is good for is traveling the world map so that you don't tire out your racing Chocobo.
Yeah, and what's funny is you need Knights of the Round to pretty much kill the weapon that you need to get the other Chocobo. It's like, that is such a awkward, like, who came up with an idea of you can beat Ruby Weapon without Knights of the Round? I didn't use that method. But it's like, why would you even want to try a method without Mime, without Quadra Magic, without HP MP, or Knights of the Round? I'm like gobsmacked. So it's like the reward for beating Ruby Weapon is the fact that you beat Ruby Weapon. Like, getting that Chocobo is worthless at that point. But it's a sign that you've done it. Then there's the Battle Arena, which can be frustrating. As I've seen, Leigh didn't see this happen, but I was trying to play it, and I'd had this situation where Cloud was unkillable. He would have regen, he'd have wall, he'd have all of his materia, but if you hit items were sealed and all of your material were busted, there was this enemy that would fly in the air and you couldn't hit him. You couldn't touch him with a skill, you couldn't hit him with magic, you couldn't hit him with an item, so I had to run and lose the fight. Then there were other times where it's like, I have a ribbon, I'm safe from everything. Nope, accessory's broken, bye. Oh, you got defense? Nope, your accessory's broken, bye. Your weapon's broken. It's like, ugh. And it always happened, too, where if the accessory breaks, it'll hit you with Frog, or it'll hit you with Mini, just to fucking spite you. So I'm glad you told me to do that stuff off camera, because that would have taken like an hour of footage. Because, I mean, I like the battle arena, but it is frustrating.
Oh, yeah.
Because, like, you're trying to get those 96,000 points to get the W Summon and Omni Slash together. I mean, you could get them separately, but together they're 96,000 points. But for every, like, 8 to 10,000 point battle, there's going to be, like, 4 or 5. Oh, you only got 700. You only got 400. You only got... You can see why that would have taken forever. So that was a good suggestion. So now we've got an episode in the can at time of recording where it's like one episode of 2 battle arena fights. I'm like, that's way more convenient. But speaking of fighting, I was shocked. Absolutely shocked. Because you found this out, like, I think you said you were sleeping. Because I did this at like 10:30 at night or something dumb. I fought Emerald Weapon and then forgot to record it.
Oh.
So what happened was I was like level 62 or 63 or something. And I was like, I was just going to do an initial run. I had a plan of like 777. I was like, okay, well, we'll try it. And then try Knights of the Round. I had no idea I would do it. Because what happened was I did the method. He still killed me with the Revenge Stomp because I didn't kill him fast enough. And then there was Airtam, Storm, and Cloud died because I didn't have Final Attack. But I tried it again, and then I had enough to do damage. So I just... That's why when you saw the footage, it's like, you have to be very exacting against these guys to not let them do their damaging moves. And it ended up being one of those situations like, Emerald Weapon died in the second try. Ruby Weapon died in the first try. And I didn't even have Final Attack Phoenix or whatever. I was just like, well, let's see what happens with Knights of the Round, and let's go. And I was like, well, that was kind of easy. And I felt dumb because I'm like, well, what was it? You were telling me like halfway through the playthrough, it was like, dude, why aren't you fighting the Emerald Weapons? Like, you should just do it. And then I'm like, all right, I'll do it.
Yeah, you weren't even going to, and I kind of shamed you into it.
Yeah, it was the same with Fort Condor. Like, when I was doing Fort Condor, I was totally gonna just not do it, and then 40 minutes later, like, yep, we beat the guy.
Yeah, and I'm giving you tips during Fort Condor.
Yeah, I mean, I knew what they were, but it's like I just had no patience for it.
I was just like, dude, you should do this. And I was sitting there like, I kept telling him what to do, and sure enough, he beat Fort Condor's battle pretty quick.
Yeah. But
like Fort Condor, everybody makes Fort Condor out to be this like horrible experience, and it's like takes forever. But it's like if you know what you're doing, it goes by really fast.
I think it's mostly because I'm not a fan of the tactical games, like Final Fantasy Tactics or Fire Emblem or whatever. I'm just not into that sort of style of game.
I hate Final Fantasy Tactics.
You just made a lot of enemies.
I don't care.
So yes, if you dislike this video, it's not because of me. Personally, I find that game style a little too slow for my liking, but I respect people who do.
Look, I'm an old lady and I'm opinionated.
So yes, you've heard it from her. But yeah, again, I think it's more that like I don't want to do Fort Condor more than I have to, and like if you want to and get all the items, there's like 20 different fights you can do in Fort Condor, and you only really have to do one.
As Reno would say, don't misunderstand.
Yeah.
Just because I hate Final Fantasy Tactics does not mean I'm going to hate you for liking it.
Yeah. And I think that's something we say all the time is don't shoot the messenger. Just try to have an open mind. But that's a different story for a different day. But it does, it does bleed into what I remember a video Pro Jared did was too many fucking minigames. Chocobo side quest, Chocobo racing, G-Bike, this thing, and then we haven't even talked about Fort Condor. Then we have to go Great Glacier, climb up the thing, and press square to do the thing. Then you've got to press square to do the CPR. Then you got to do this to climb up the fucking dolphin. Then, you can see where they're small things, but it's like every single little thing has to be like a mini game. It wasn't so much that they had like 5 or 10 solid mini games that they wanted to do. They added in, hey, let's do some squats to get a wig. Hey, let's do CPR on this 10-year-old girl.
The squats was actually kind of fun, though.
Yeah, the squats was fun, but you can see where if people are kind of weirded out by, I'm playing an RPG about fighting dudes in a line. What am I doing giving CPR to this girl that I just met? What am I doing jumping on this dolphin? Like, they're fun ideas, but they don't, like... That's where the issue of execution comes. Because they give you all these, like, weird, like, minigames that they don't really program very well.
Hey,
like,
back then, Flipper was a thing.
Yeah, I know. But you can see where I'm sitting there going, like, the Junin, not so much the Junin combination thing. I was good at it. It's the Junin running through the line of soldiers and getting yourself in the line. Otherwise, you fall back into, that sort of thing. The first one.
I hated that part.
I remember beating that by just hitting the button for triple speed by accident and just running off the screen. And I succeeded. I still don't know how that happened. I must have gotten to the trigger point the right way, but still had the triple speed on by accident, and it just came out of nowhere. I'm like, whatever, I'm done. I don't give a shit. Get me to the fun stuff. So it's kind of like, I'm of two minds. Like, I'm happy they have the option, but I can also see if somebody is frustrated having the weirdness of, why are we doing this weird minigame to warm ourselves up in the Great Glacier? We don't have to do that. Most other games don't do that. I think it's a cool concept. It's kind of wonky, but I don't know. It's just weird. Final Fantasy VII is weird, It's just got a lot of weird stuff in it.
Yeah.
What isn't weird is the music. I love the music of Final Fantasy VII. I'm not gonna lie. I think that seems like such an obvious statement to make, right? But it's like, those first 10 Final Fantasy games, of course I like the music in them. But I like the music in 12, but it doesn't feel like a Final Fantasy game to me. But it's like, where do you pick and choose what Final Fantasy game is your favorite music-wise? Because we said this with 8. It's like, there's like 20 or 30 different songs I could point to and say, I love this song. Like, I love it. And everybody's just,
yeah.
Final Fantasy VII is the same way. It's like, everybody loves One Winged Angel, but I'm sitting there going, yeah, but this song, though. Yeah, but this song and this song. And what's weird about 7 isn't so much the music choices. I think it's the fact that compared to 8, and this goes into the visuals too, is how kind of hackneyed it sounds and weird it looks, because it was their first attempt at a PlayStation game. I think they still used MIDI sound chips rather than a full orchestra. So Final Fantasy VII still has this weird beep boop feel to it, but it's still kind of distinct. Like, no other game sounds like Final Fantasy VII, but it's also like, I don't know. Like, I like it, but I don't think the sound is as good as I remember. So it's like, whenever they redo like One Winged Angel or the like Final Fantasy VII Remake, when they remade the boss theme, it's like, oh, this is what I missed. But again, like, One Winged Angel is such a like iconic thing, irrespective of how easy that boss fight actually is. Just the moment of seeing Sephiroth descend while this like crazy ass opera/rock song is coming into your face. I said that totally wrong. I'm gonna redo that. Coming at you. That's what I meant. Forget what I said.
And
yes.
What did you actually say?
Coming in your face.
Wow.
We're doing it. We're an hour and a half in. Whatever. I don't care. coming at you. That song is coming at you. It's an amazing experience. But I can also, much like the mini games, I can understand, why do these people look like Lego people? Why does this place look like shit? Why do some of these enemies look like crap? You know, it is a weirdly designed game because it's the first one they did. And you have more experience with Parasite Eve than I do. Parasite Eve looks 20 times better than this game does. At least from a
Parasite Eve happened a little bit closer to Final Fantasy VIII.
Yeah, so like a year after.
So, yeah, when they were doing Final Fantasy VIII, they had already just released Parasite Eve, and they were able to like really streamline their video game process for the PlayStation.
Yeah,
because Final Fantasy VII was actually one of the first games that they made for the PlayStation console.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of bugs to work out with the developers. Like when they make the way they explain it is they get a kit that they use to help them learn the software for what they're trying to do. And this was the first time that they were really working on a PlayStation game. So it took them a while to get used to the things that the PlayStation can do, and it took them a while to learn how to use the software and shit.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of things that they wanted to do for Final Fantasy VII that they still didn't know how to do. And it basically just ended up like Final Fantasy VII was their branching off point into doing better games. Because once they figured out how to do everything, they were able to start doing more like it. And then, like, not only that, but PlayStation themselves, Sony kept working on the PlayStation and making it a little bit better and able to do more graphically. Wow. So by the time Final Fantasy VII was out and it was released, there was already another version of the PlayStation out that had a little bit more in the way of capability. So Square was able to do more with their future games. That's why Parasite Eve came out, and it was it visually was superior.
Yeah, because Parasite Eve looks like Final Fantasy VIII does, and
that's why when they started working on Final Fantasy VIII, that was why, like I had said during the Final Fantasy VIII podcast, when they were designing characters, they had all these new limit. Like their new capabilities that they didn't have during the work on Final Fantasy VII. Yeah. So they were trying to make up characters that looked really good, but not too beautiful, so that you were just like overwhelmed by how pretty they were.
Yeah. And Sony PlayStation always fit to me like it was a halfway house between the people who wanted to stay in the 2D realm. Like even some of their even some of the stuff like Legend of Mana was still a 2D-esque game, but with like isometrics. Breath of Fire 3, which was made by Capcom, was like sprite work and old school JRPGs, but it was an isometric looking game like Super Mario RPG, but it still runs on a PlayStation. So it's like Castlevania Symphony of the Night was a 2D game. It just looked fantastic. The music was not up to like a Sony PlayStation 2 or what recent music is like, but it's weird that you go from Final Fantasy VI being 2D, Chrono Trigger being 2D, all of a sudden being tasked to do a 3D game. Even like Ocarina of Time, for all the stuff it achieved, like that was still 1998, and Super Mario 64. I don't have as much fondness for 64 like Super Mario 64, but I know people who do. Like those are test run games for like 3D, and that's what people don't recognize about 3D is it changes almost everything you have to do about what you're doing when you have to think about a 3D plane. We're kind of lucky that Final Fantasy VII was kind of like half 2D, half 3D still. But still, it's like stuff like the Aerith's death scene, and then all of a sudden, like Sephiroth with his Lego hands is like, I've defeated you, and look at my Lego hands. It's like those scenes don't work as well because they look so weird. I think you can see what I'm trying to get at. It's like if they had the Final Fantasy VIII look to them, they probably would have been way more effective and less like, oh my god, there's the full motion videos and Sephiroth's tearing into the Genova cell and then Lego arms stretched out. It's kind of like they looked like used toothpaste bottles for arms, you know. It's still like I don't know of any other game that looks like this. It's so weird. And it's like they can in battle, like they don't look like that. In battle, they look like normal. That's what I found so strange, though. But I guess they were using a different software or whatever for the battles than they were for the on a field stuff. I don't know the mechanics. But if I was to say that was a negative, I guess, I mean, far be it from me to say that, but we are getting near the end. I do want to mention negatives and positives of Final Fantasy VII. I'll start with negatives first, so we end on the positive notes. The Lego arms, the Lego characters, you know, that is a thing. I mean, I can't not say that. I think I've said before the minigames are hit and miss. I love most of them, but I'm also like, yeah, they're kind of poorly designed. But here's something I haven't talked about, and this is more to do with the way the game is and how recent developments have changed games. I think when I'm trying to replay Final Fantasy VII, I don't really like replaying the Nibelheim flashback. As central a character, I don't really like replaying Cloud's subconscious or the reunion section because I cannot skip them.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with them as cutscenes, because I think Persona 4 has the same problem with anytime you're fighting a boss battle. If you played the Unalesca fight in Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy X does not have skippable cutscenes. And yet Metal Gear Solid does. Xenosaga 1 do. They were released at kind of the same time. Sure, Square Enix is a different company. I totally get that. But you can understand where my frustration is as somebody who's replayed this. They're not skippable?
Exactly.
No. Get it away from me. I have to live through this. I don't want to. I just want to get back to hitting dudes. But again, it was kind of like living through the desert prison scene in Final Fantasy VIII and then going to everything else like the desert base, the missile base. Like, oh, I'm happy again. Yay. So it sounds like a minor quibble, but you can understand why I'm frustrated that unskippable cutscenes are a thing that Final Fantasy VII had. But turning the floor over to you, was there anything in this game that you felt was like a negative? Like flat out, I don't like this.
I'm trying to. You know what? Probably Gaia's Cliff.
Oh yeah.
I'm not even gonna lie. During that whole thing, like the fact that at any point you could just pass out from the cold.
Yeah.
You could pass out from the cold when you're sitting there trying to run around and not pass out from the cold.
Yeah.
Like, winter gear exists. You could literally put on a fucking coat.
Yeah.
And then the one guy who lives at the base of Gaia's Cliff and his family hasn't seen him in 20 years? He won't go home?
Yeah, that's kind of weird.
He could easily set up that rest area for people and just be like, you know what? I'm just going to set this rest area up for people. I'm going to leave supplies here every now and then. I'm going to go home to my family.
Yeah.
He can even sit there and recruit people to come live up there.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But the fact that he just went up there and his family never saw him again. Like, dude, you're a fucking selfish asshole.
Yeah. I don't know about people who climb mountains and whatever. I mean, but even those people don't do that. They do that for the thrill of it, and then they leave. They're like, I don't live on Mount Everest. Fuck you. But
I think it's my civic duty to live on this mountain just so I can keep your ass from dying on it.
Yeah, like I should just live in Midgar where it's not sun. Well, no, if I want to live somewhere, Costa del Sol, what was I thinking? But like Barrett's sitting there freezing in his gun arm and vest, and he's like, I guess Midgar's a better place than I thought it was. Well, yeah, because it's not fucking freezing. But
you know
yeah.
what? Honestly, I would rather live in a cold, snowy place like Icicle Inn than in a hot, sweaty place like Costa del Sol.
Yeah, I mean, you do
That's
have
just
more.
me.
Well, you have more that you can work with a colder environment. I know because I live in Minnesota. But yeah, I can understand it. Like from a mechanic standpoint, like no other game forces you into the just pass out and die. You know, so it kind of reminded me of the Persona 3, like everybody's feeling good, but there are also times when they feel great, but they also you need to sleep, and like little things like that you didn't have to do. And they're just more frustrating than actually novel and unique. I can totally understand Gaia's Cliff and the Great Glacier. I don't like the Great Glacier, to be honest. The snowboarding is the best part about it, because we were following a guide, and I'm just sitting there dying in those stupid icicle spots, just trying to get back from that stupid spot in the center of the area. I wasn't even trying to get much. I didn't get everything in the Great Glacier. I was just trying to get the fuck out of there, but we still needed to do the thing to get Alexander. So I'm like, no, done. Like,
yeah.
Like, why?
Yeah.
Anything else about the game that just drove you nuts?
I don't think of anything. I'm sure I'll think of something later when it doesn't matter, but I can't think of anything now.
Yeah, but I guess that also speaks to how good Final Fantasy VII was, even from as wonky of a setup and an execution standpoint. It still has all of those characters we talked about. Whether you like Cloud, Aerith, Tifa, Sephiroth, all of the main cast, I'm in it for the cast, not so much the story. I mean, the story is what it is, but I think it's still a good story, because of the
Great
weird
story.
Yeah, the layers that they go to explain, because it goes into what I said before about Final Fantasy VIII is leaving things to chance and not liking that. And then you told me, no, just wait a minute, they'll explain everything. Shut up, just shut up. They'll explain it. Final Fantasy VII does, and even though it does have you like go back to Nebel to show you the Zack cutscene, you don't have to do that. You still understand everything that goes on with Cloud, but they give you that extra context. They show you the Vincent cutscenes if you want them there, you know. So it shows that they were thinking about how to tell this really layered story, but still give you, hey, do you want to go to Nebel? Do you want to go to Costa del Sol and have a beach episode? Go. Like the world tour. I loved seeing every city and every little nuance, like whether Shinra was involved or not, like Gold Saucer, all of that stuff, all in disc 1. It's as much as I love Final Fantasy X and how good its world building is, Final Fantasy VII is up there. And I think it just told a well-written story, but it did it really fast. Final Fantasy VII is a fast game. It doesn't seem like it's slow at all. That's something I also appreciated, was like you get done with something, you're on to something else. You're not stuck.
Yeah.
Unlike the Final Fantasy VII Remake, where, yeah, you're in a sewer for an hour. Have fun. Duh. You know, but again, that's just me complaining about 7 Remake because we had to, I guess. I think it also helps that the boss fights aren't so demanding, because Final Fantasy VII is kind of in the, it's as easy or as hard as you want to make it. As much as I prefer classes and jobs, the fact that you can mess around with materia until it's like the end of the day and you're still not done, like tinkering with the system, it's like, imagine what somebody new thinks of this. Never played Final Fantasy. You're never going to get a game like this ever again. This is the only game I know of that does a system like this to this degree. I'm floored by the amount of options that they were able to throw in, because they took 6 games worth of stuff and then added more stuff to it. Like, there was stuff in Final Fantasy VII that they did not have in Final Fantasy VI and V. And I don't think ever again they do anything like this. No other Final Fantasy game is like this, and it's kind of weird. Given how popular 7 was, it's like, no, we never do the materia system again, and we just do something else.
Yeah. And see, like, one of the things that I meant to say earlier was, like, part of the reason why, like, part of the reason the old leadership of Square before the merger with Enix, they had a philosophy of, like, each Final Fantasy game was supposed to be a standalone game. There was never supposed to be anything extra about it. Like, no extra content or whatever. So that's why, like, why we had to wait so long to even get things like Before Crisis and Crisis Core and all of that. It was just literally because they weren't supposed to exist.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, it wasn't until new management stepped into play that they started to think, hey, maybe this is not the right way to go about it. Maybe the fans actually do want more content.
Yeah, and I'm still waiting on Final Fantasy X-0 with Jack and Braska in it, but we'll get that someday. But at least
so, because that would be a cool game.
Yeah, but I mean, at least we still have Charlie's Angels Blitzball edition. So,
No, you know what? It would have been a cool game if they made it back when they were making X2. Then it would have been a cool game. Now we're most likely going to get something that's not a cool game, like the remake.
Yeah, or Final Fantasy X, the after years, where it's going to be Final Fantasy X-2, but you're going to pay every single chapter. I'm like, nah.
I really kind of don't want them to make a Final Fantasy or an X3 like people keep thinking they're going to.
No.
Because that whole the audio chapter, the Eternal Calm.
Oh no.
Started.
Yes. No.
I really wish they hadn't made it, because, like, for everybody who worked to get the good ending of X2, that audio thing that they did is just like a slap in the face to all of them.
And that's the thing. That's the issue with the remake too. Is, like, I don't think you're going to make anybody happy, because you have the people that played Final Fantasy VII, the OG, that were like, you should have just made new threat mod, but an official version, like the Pixel remasters. Like, nothing about the Pixel remasters is going to be a new thing. But 7 Remake is going to be...
That's what I was going to get into earlier, since we were talking about Remake just a minute ago.
Yeah.
What I heard is that what they're trying to do with Rebirth, I think it's like that's the next chapter that's coming out or whatever.
Yeah.
That's either the next one coming out or it's going to be the final one coming out. I don't know which. But with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, they're basically trying to, like, reboot it to where everything that you're seeing, like Remake and all of this, is a memory.
Is a what?
A memory.
What? Like a dream?
Like a memory of what happened in the past or something.
Oh.
Or, like, I think what I heard, one of the fan theories that I heard was that they're using Remake as an excuse to rewrite what happened.
Oh.
Like, they're going back and saying, like, the planet is speaking to Aerith and telling her what's going to happen so that she can change it.
What?
Because she's not because the planet doesn't want her to die. She's the last living descendant of the Cetra.
That's not what I would have expected.
So yeah, what they're trying to do, I think, is, if you're going by what I've been seeing online, is they're trying to use Remake as a way to possibly change Aerith's fate. And possibly Zack's too.
I mean,
that they don't die.
And again, I don't know. I don't think you're gonna make anybody happy. I think
I think that if Aerith doesn't die, it makes the story really cheap.
Yeah,
I think it cheapens what happens. Because
Yeah.
Aerith dying, as much of a tragedy as that was at the end of Disc 1, Aerith dying needed to happen.
Yeah.
They needed a push to keep going against Shinra and eventually defeat Sephiroth.
Yeah.
And her sacrificing herself for the sake of the planet like that was the biggest motivation that they had.
Yeah.
And it also helped push Cloud into getting his head back on straight.
Yeah. I think, to me, Remake is what Remake is going to be. I don't know if anything they make after this is going to reflect on, hey, Remake wasn't so bad. Like, I understood the frustration of, and we talked about this, is the Remake a replacement for Final Fantasy VII? Absolutely not. If you want to play the OG version, that's the OG version. What they made there is the way it is. I remember Jim Sterling saying during his review that, think of this like a movie adaptation of the original source material. It's like not going to make everybody happy because they missed this thing and this thing and this thing. Oh, they changed this thing. This is dumb. Like, you're going to have those people.
Like, I'm not saying Remake is bad, because it's beautiful. It's just,
there are things that could be,
it's been badly executed so far.
Yeah. And to be fair, I do think having the people that were involved with the original helps. So it's not like just fans doing fan things, but it's also going to be like, well, why would we trust the people who are 20 years older to rewrite a story when they could not be? I mean, they could not be the same person they were when they made Final Fantasy VII. That's a creative risk. Versus somebody who is beholden to, it's like, say for me, like, I am such a hardliner for the way things are supposed to be. Like, if it isn't the same that it always was, then that's the risk you run with these retro remake revival things. Like, I'm rewatching Trigun. They made a new version of Trigun, the anime. Like, the anime exists in 1998, 1999, and then they made a new one. Like, they remake everything else. They have Dumb and Dumber 2. They have Rise of Skywalker. They have all this stuff that
Jesus.
It's an IP. IPs never die. They just never leave it alone. So I think it's its own separate argument. I think
you know what? People had the same arguments about Sailor Moon and Sailor Moon Crystal. And I am one of those people who's actually watched both. And Sailor Moon was really great. And I think Crystal gets a lot of shit that it doesn't deserve, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and it is a fine line. I mean, I totally understand. What are they making a remake for? Money.
Yeah.
They're just making it for money. That's all they're doing it for. So
Sailor Moon Crystal, I think, is probably one of those really rare instances where they went back and they improved it. They kept it more. What they did was, when they were making Sailor Moon Crystal, they made it more true to the source material than the original anime was.
Yeah, and you can see why that thing happens with, like, Brotherhood, like Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood and whatever. Everybody swears by that.
I'm Brotherhood. Okay, the original Full Metal Alchemist was good and everything, but Brotherhood was way better.
And I that's the situation I run into sometimes when trying to explain this, is you're not going to replace the Full Metal Alchemist manga or anime 100% whatever, regardless of what you do. I think what people just have to be like, if you like a certain version, you should be able to explain why. If it turns out that
what got people with the ending to the original Full Metal Alchemist was that it was just so fucked up.
Well, yeah, I understand.
And then they made Brotherhood, and they fixed the problems they made.
It's possible, yes, and yes, I understand the adherence to source material, but therein lies the trap: is just because it's the source material doesn't mean that you're absolutely 100% perfect. So if
they fucked the ending to Full Metal Alchemist up so badly, though.
No, but you can understand what I'm saying is you shouldn't be beholden to the source material as gospel just because it was something that the person wrote. If that's what they wrote, but everybody else thinks, yeah, you kind of suck.
Exactly
I get
what
that.
Everybody's point with it was, though. most of the criticism about Full Metal Alchemist came from the fact that they it wasn't the fact that it didn't go along completely with the source material. It was that it deviated so far from it that it was like being rewritten.
I can see that. And I guess in a way,
So
Remake is kind of in that same bubble where they could do that. And they probably
so
already
when
have.
when they did Brotherhood, first off, they went back and they fixed the mistakes that had been made with the original. Like the character of Wrath from the original.
Wasn't a boy.
No, Wrath was King Bradley.
Yeah.
So they went back and they fixed that for one thing.
Yeah.
And then for another thing, they went back and they they expanded on what was it? The one who shapeshifted.
It wasn't Greed. No, that was the.
No, but they went back and they did more with Greed too.
Yeah.
They.
God damn it. Envy.
Envy. That's the one.
Yeah.
They went back and they expanded what Envy had done. They kept Lust pretty much the same,
which is good because she's awesome.
Lust was great.
Yeah.
They expanded Scar. They added this little girl. The Scar ended up bonding with this little girl.
Yeah, and I haven't.
She's the one when they towards the ending here. Like, I'm going into huge spoilers here. This little girl actually thought that Alphonse was supposed to be the Full Metal Alchemist, and she was in love with him. And after Alphonse got his body restored, they got married.
Okay.
He married this cute little Asian girl who had this little mini panda. And
wait, what? They what? That girl?
Yeah, the little girl with the mini panda.
Oh, for God's sake! I got to like 40 episodes before I couldn't handle it, and I'm like, what the fuck? Well,
yeah, that little girl. She had this huge lady boner for Alphonse.
And I thought saying "coming on your face" was going to be the weirdest thing I'd say to all this stream. Anyway, lady boners for all.
And then Ed and Winry. Okay, I'm a huge supporter of Ed and Winry. They're fucking adorable. Not to mention, you cross Winry, she's going to hit you with a big wrench.
Yep.
I like girls like that. I'm one of those girls.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna like physically hit you with a wrench. I'm more likely.
Well, good, because I'm halfway across the country. I don't think you could.
I'm more likely to just give you a good zinger.
Yeah. But you can see how we're kind of on opposite sides of the thing. Like with Remake, I'm sitting there going like, you run the risk as a creator to make something terrible, just as much as fans do.
Yeah.
So
it is a very fine line. Like, you can see where, like, the desire to fix your mistakes or to do what you didn't have the capabilities of doing before is really strong. And you can see things like that, like with Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood and Sailor Moon Crystal. They went back and they fixed everything wrong with the originals and they made it better.
Yeah.
In a lot of people's opinions. Some people are purists and think that it's garbage. But my point of view has never been that Remake is terrible. It's just that it's been executed badly so far. First off, it was plagued by a whole shit ton of development issues. Yeah. Like, more than halfway through the original development of Remake, they had to change companies.
Oh.
And that new company had to start all over again.
Oh,
Remake would actually have probably been a lot different if the original company that had been working on it had been able to finish working.
Yeah.
But like halfway through the development, that company had to scrap everything they were doing, and Square went to a different company.
Sounds like Final Fantasy XV all over again. Oh boy.
Yeah, so that pushed Remake's release and development back even further.
Yeah.
It meant that we had to wait like almost 2 more years for a release on a game that should have been out years ago after it had been teased.
Yeah.
And then, not to mention the fact that what we get is basically 5 hours worth of the gameplay plot stretched out into this gigantic 40 to 50 hour RPG.
Yeah.
And it just, parts of it were way too bloated, and some of it was just like not bloated enough, you could say. Like, so, and it was just, I love Aerith to death, but her voice actor just makes me want to destroy things.
And yet I love the fact that they brought her back to the way she was. But I can totally understand that. But I also
love Aerith to death. She's one of my favorite Final Fantasy characters ever. I hate her voice actor this time around.
Yeah. I think the voice actors did fine. But again, I think I have an unfair advantage because I've said before, like a lot of the podcasts I do, I tend to talk about voice actors a lot. Like
I am by no means a fan of Mandy Moore, but I would have been happy with her.
Well, and again, I think people were like, if you like the original Advent Children cast, most of them are still around. I don't think they retired or passed away.
Oh man, I'm not even talking about the Advent Children cast for this one.
Well, yeah, but you see what I'm saying is like there was an urge when they were making this. The fans wanted Steve Blum to be Vincent, and he still could be. I don't think he's gonna be. But then
Steve Burton to be Cloud.
Yeah, you want the original Sephiroth back, or not the original, but the Advent Children one. I totally understand that.
Oh yeah,
but I think
he sounded so hot.
Yes, but funny enough, that guy was also Nuge in Final Fantasy X too. But yeah, it's weird that like I still think that there's still good voice actors to be had all through the remake, because I told you like the guy who did Barrett was also in a Yakuza game. The lady who does Jessie's voices in almost every goddamn show that I know, so I know that she's good at everything. She was Futaba in Persona 5, right? So I'm like sitting there going, I'm not going to complain about this acting because I know who these people are, or I've heard them in everything. So it's like,
oh my god, they're the way they portrayed Jessie though, like really drove me
thirsty.
Crazy.
Yes, but I can totally understand. Yeah, I would imagine a lot of people's interpretation of Jessie is not the same thing that the male population thought, because I'm sure every male in the audience thought she's the best thing ever because she blows stuff up and she's thirsty for Cloud, and then you're like, no, get away from me, get away from me, get away from me, no.
Just no, yeah.
Yeah,
I totally love that she's a chick who likes to blow shit up because
that's Selphie.
That is she's like part she speaks to that part of my soul.
Yeah.
My inner chick really loves to blow shit up.
Yeah. But you thought that she was trying too hard to be an actor in an actual real life scenario.
My whole point, she was treating everything about her life like she was an actor in a stage show. Oh, yeah. Because that's what her job was.
Yeah.
That's what her job was. She was an actor in a theater. So she treated everything like that. Oh. And like freaking Wedge even sits there and tells Cloud, he's like, don't get too serious about Jessie because basically she's just treating all of this like a big acting exercise.
Well, sucks to be me because
she didn't come off like someone who's actually wanting to try to help save the planet. She was acting like a spoiled little rich girl who was just treating this like, oh hey, guess what? I'm just gonna do this to study for my role, and it's all fine. Yeah,
well, then look what happens. But again, this is another one of those changes that Remake might make because they've already had Biggs come back. So it's like within the realm of possibility that Jessie is going to be absolutely fine. And then part of me is like, well, yeah, that kind of sucks. And then the other part of me is like, that's actually kind of cool. Can she be a party member? I want to throw bombs. It's
entirely possible that they escaped Sector 7 before the plate fell.
Yeah, and I think
it could have been entirely possible in the original game if it, because we never saw for sure that they died.
No, it's implied though.
It's implied heavily because we never see anything or hear anything about them after everybody escapes Midgar.
Yeah. But I think in the Biggs, Wedge, and Jessie thing, like if they became like full-fledged like secondary party members, that if you wanted to have them in in a segment of the game, like it'd be kind of neat. I don't know if I'd want them to be full-fledged party members, though. If you're gonna, I would say Jessie would be the best choice because she'd have the whole bombs thing to fall back on. It's like, she chuck grenades from a distance. That'd be kind of neat.
I think they were trying too hard to make her like Riku.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but there's only one Riku, and Jessie is not it.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. But again, I think that's where everything lies with the franchise is there's never not going to be a Final Fantasy VII. Like, they're making too much goddamn money to not. Like, the remake made 5 million copies in sales, right? The Intergrade probably made like another million or so. They're going to make money to spite themselves. And I don't trust Square Enix as a company. The issue is that the people developing the game are kind of like in that like weird bubble, like you said. Like, they have every inclination to possibly make this the most awesome thing ever, but they can also fuck this up totally royally.
Yeah.
So Final Fantasy VII is like, as a property, like it's not going anywhere. The original game is going to be what it's going to be because it was what it was going to be back in 1997 and 1998. It's just everything after that. And we'll do this if we do other episodes like Dirge of Cerberus or Advent Children or the remake or whatever, because there's a lot of stuff that they've made after the fact because they won't leave this franchise alone. But Final Fantasy VII as a game exists as its own entity. So I think at the end of the day, if you're one of those people like me who's like, the remake's fine, but it's got problems versus, your situation is like, it's not good and it's not going to stay good. But then you have the absolute extremists who are way worse than even you're suggesting. It's like, nah, this is total bullshit. Don't make this. It's dumb. The fact that we have this kind of discussion says a lot about what Final Fantasy VII did. I don't know of any franchise in an RPG space that does anything like this game does and will continue to do. But that'll do it for us, I think. But at the same time, I do want to give you the floor. Do you have anything you want to say? Plug anything right now?
Well, I'm still plugging my fiance and my Etsy store. And, the change that I talked about possibly adding earrings and things that I've made has actually happened.
Nice.
I've got a couple of pairs of earrings in the listings, and there's merch with my logo on it now. I haven't worked myself up to a t-shirt yet, but I have a coffee mug.
Oh, coffee mug. Nice.
Yeah, I got a cute little coffee mug. There's little buttons for you to pin on your jacket. There's even Christmas ornaments. He thought Christmas ornaments would be a cute idea. Go figure.
There's also your Twitch channel. It says you not only... I thought it was funny was we played Final Fantasy VIII together, and then like the week after that, you played through Final Fantasy VIII on your own, and then did the same thing when we started 7.
We had so much fun with the recordings that it was like, I really want to play this game again, even though I've already streamed it on my channel. So I did. I went and I streamed it, and it only took me I think I streamed it for 2 weeks. But because
stuff happens.
I love playing stuff, and I just it didn't take me that long because I'm really good at the game.
Yeah, but not just Final Fantasy, but you do stuff like Animal Crossing. I've seen you recently do Silent Hill and all the other.
Well, Silent Hill 2 was a community thing.
Okay.
I had actually agreed to do Silent Hill 2 for Spooktober, and then I only got one stream of that in. I only had gotten almost halfway through the game, and then I had a problem with my save data, and it ended up getting erased by accident. So then I just left it alone for a while, and then I was stuck for something to play, and I'm just like, so I asked my community, I'm like, what do you guys want to see me play next? And there were 3 choices. There was I think it was House Flipper,
which
No,
you've also done.
I didn't have
stream.
House Flipper yet. I hadn't done House Flipper yet, but I did one stream of House Flipper, and I'm just like, unless my community says that they're actually interested in seeing me try it again, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
But I had Silent Hill 2, Final Fantasy VII, and a Sims scenario or something.
Well, you know what?
There was
you know which one I voted for.
Oh yeah, I know which one you voted for. But there was a Sims scenario that I really wanted to try that I ended up doing anyway, even though nobody voted for. And it was funny. And let's see. So what ended up winning that by like one vote was Silent Hill 2.
Which I'm still okay with, by the way. Don't let
so
it be
I
said.
Did it.
Yeah, don't just because I love my Final Fantasy games doesn't mean I don't mind other games. I've tried to have other stuff on my channel.
Guess which ending I got? I got the leave ending.
Oh, okay. I was about to say you got the dog ending. I'm like, no.
Wish I'd gotten the dog ending, but you can't get that on the first playthrough. You have to have a certain key that you can only get on a New Game Plus playthrough. Because the way to get the dog ending is to get this key to the observation room in the hotel and to go into the observation room. And then once you go in that room, it supersedes the rest of the game. Like, you don't get the final Pyramid Heads fight, and you don't get the final boss fight either. You go into that observation room, and that's it. It's game over.
But yeah, because the dog's running the game. Oh, no. But I think that will do. We'll post this at the beginning of March, given where Final Fantasy VII is on. We're about halfway done. We had about 70 videos.
If it's the beginning of March, then happy birthday, sweetie. My older daughter is going to be 15 in March.
Nice. So she may or may not be 15 by the time this uploads that week.
I told you guys I'm old. I have a daughter who's almost 15 now.
Hey, I don't have kids, so I wouldn't know. But I still remember a comment I made, and I think you were trying to say something about, I think it was something about me doing dishes, and I said, well, you're coming across as a mom, and I think it just came into a conversation like, well, yeah, gee, you wonder why? It's because I am a mom,
right? I'm like,
so it just became
anytime anyone accuses me, like, you're sounding like such a mom, and I'm like, gee, I wonder why.
So that was one of those things where I had to backpedal. I'm like, uh-oh. So I'm like, whoops. I was like, yeah, this is like coming on your face. You're talking about breaking a dick in half. Like, why do we say these things? But
I swear I didn't mean to say break his dick in half.
I know, but it ended up happening. So I'm not going to say no.
And it was funny.
But yes, before we get into any more trouble, I do want to say thank you to anyone who stopped by, because this has exceeded our Final Fantasy VIII podcast by about 10 minutes. So if you've been here for that long, thank you for watching, because you got extra content about Fullmetal Alchemist and Sailor Moon and other Final Fantasy games. But for us, I think that will do, because I think we're both tired. I know I am, but I'm swimming in caffeine, so I don't know. But if you want more content, be sure to vote for these games. We'll have one like Secret of Mana that's probably playing as we speak. But Leigh will probably stop into some other games eventually, or we'll have more podcasts with her, because I like her as a person. I couldn't say friend for some reason, because words are hard after 2 hours. So I think that's a good place where we're going to stop. But yes, for Leigh, for me,
we're friends, and I forgive you.
Yes, thank God, because I want to keep my job. What job do I have? I don't know. But yes, you can see I'm trying to find a way to stop this conversation for all our sakes. But for everyone here, that'll do it for us. Citizen Strife and Leigh signing off.